Thank you for the invitation. And I don't actually have slides, and I think this is the last kind of talk. I think it will be appreciated that I don't show you a bunch of writings on the wall, but thank you for the invitation. And I'm here, as you said, in representing my research collective, Planning for Entropy. And I was asked to speak especially on our paper that you mentioned that came out in Science and Society called Democratic Economic Planning, Social Metabolism and the Environment. Which, I mean, kind of briefly, the paper, what we've done in that paper is we've evaluated the main proposals and models of democratic economic planning from an ecological perspective, particularly in the way that they take environmental issues into account. So these main models or proposals are Cockshott and Cottrell's computerized central planning, Albert and Hanel's participatory economics, and Devine and Adaman's negotiated coordination, which, as a side note, I should add that I was pleasantly surprised to hear Christophe mentioned, because in the paper that I've read of his, he doesn't actually talk about Devine and Adaman. So I'd be curious to hear what kind of led him to that recently, but that's a side issue. I'm now going to talk about I'm not going to talk about our kind of specific evaluations of these models, but rather I want to outline some of the insights and kind of conceptual and theoretical insights that we've drawn upon coming from ecological economics that we've used in evaluating these proposals. And I think that would perhaps kind of make for a good kind of food for thought or food for discussion. And I think it also kind of as a preview, sneak peek, I think it also kind of introduces a little more layer to discussions of circular economy, or what is democracy, or what is deliberation, or why we need them. I think there's a particular aspect coming from ecological economics that we've tried to articulate there. And I think especially in Elena's presentation was more or less implicit. So I'll start by that. So ecological economics is a particular field in heterodox economics, especially in its view of the economy, or its conceptualization of the economy as a biophysical process. What this means is that kind of the question of scale, biophysical scale of the economy, is kind of explicitly addressed within ecological economics. And by scale, and this has come up a few times in the chat, especially when Elena was talking about degrowth. When we talk about scale in ecological economics, it's the kind of the scale of energy and materials that are extracted, metabolized, and discarded through the economic process. So this is so the economy as a biophysical process is a process of extracting, metabolizing, and discarding energy and materials. This is called the throughput in economics, in ecological economics language. So kind of the first, perhaps the insight from ecological economics is that scale, or questions of scale, cannot be reduced to questions of allocation or distribution. So kind of the questions of scale needs to be tackled in its own terms, in biophysical terms, which kind of leads us to say that throughput itself, so the amount, so the scale and the composition of the throughput, the energy and matter that enters into the economic process, needs to be planned explicitly in biophysical terms. So it cannot be kind of reduced or rolled under prices or work hours. There are a bunch of biophysical indicators that ecological economists have developed in kind of measuring and depicting kind of biophysicality of this process. Another kind of insight is that this process, going through energy and materials, going through this process, are irreversibly transformed and biophysically degraded. So there's an entropic process. This is an entropic process. This cannot be circularized. So kind of there are definite limits to to the economic process biophysically. Another one for planning is that the scale of throughput also means that things need to be extracted and things need to be dissipated. And for those things to be extracted and for those things to be sunk back into ecosystems as waste, we will need accumulation of stocks and we will need investment. So just kind of the throughput itself has implications for the point of extraction and dissipation. So we need to be taking these points, extraction and dissipation, explicitly into account in planning. And maybe one last one in terms of this kind of the question of scale and throughput and what it implies for planning is the amount of stocks that we accumulate in an economy have further commands on flow. So the more we accumulate stuff, the more we accumulate artifacts in the form of, let's say, kind of capitalized artifacts. So what we call kind of forms of infrastructure, for instance, they will need or they will command, they will require further extraction of throughputs in order to reproduce them or in order to kind of regenerate them. So we need to be taking that question explicitly into account too. How much we choose to accumulate as stocks will have further implications on the biophysical throughput that will be required in the future. So this is kind of one big, I guess, subset of stuff or points that to be taken into account. And the second one is kind of more the insights from ecological economics about the kind of characteristics of the economic process as a biophysical process, which kind of makes, which gives us certain pointers about how economic decisions need to be made in order to kind of tackle issues of sustainability, let's say, or challenges of sustainability, which, as I said before, kind of makes the question of democracy and deliberation not kind of instrumental, but actually very much central. So the first thing I want to underline is that for ecological economists, all economic processes, like biophysical processes, are marked with complexities and uncertainties and ignorance, which is to say that there is no way that we can know the full implications, full ecological implications of our economic decisions today. And this is not a matter of having not enough data or kind of having not enough, kind of not having the right amount of data or not right amount of time to actually gather data. There are certain things that simply cannot be known about the future of ecosystems, and therefore the future implications of our economic decisions right now. What this implies for ecological economists is that these decisions, economic decisions, especially their biophysical implications, cannot be simply kind of delegated to an expert panel or a bunch of scientists. Because of these uncertainties and risks involved in kind of in our economic decisions, they need to be weighed from the perspective of differentially positioned stakeholders. So kind of a wide variety of stakeholders. They cannot just be kind of assumed away by science or a technical question. So these inherent uncertainties need to be democratically discussed so that we kind of come into a position where not one particular group within a society are in a position to be at differential risk. The second one kind of characteristic of the economic process is kind of biophysical and social interdependencies, which means especially for economic decisions that have significant biophysical impacts or implications, what we choose to do or what one party chooses to do will have a direct implication for another party's ability to do something. So every kind of decision that we make will have interdependent implications on others, which again implies that isolated atomistic decision-making is not fit to make decisions in these cases. Isolated atomistic decision-making, either in the case of a market setting or a planning setting, is not fit to deal with these interdependencies, because we need a mechanism that can deal with, reveal, and kind of articulate these interdependencies in the economic decision-making process, which calls for a deliberative, participatory, democratic process, and democratic not only in the sense of registering a preference, but democratic in the process of particularly that deliberative process of that could lead to a rearticulation of positions, a rearticulation of choices, a rearticulation of values, which I think Christophe was kind of coming at previously as kind of changing subjectivity. So that's very important in terms of the ecological implications of economic decisions as well. And the third point is what ecological economists call value incommensurability, which means kind of values that are attributed to nature are incommensurable with each other, which means they cannot be reduced to one single measure. So one single measure as kind of, if you're trying to represent values by monetary prices or by labor hours or energy terms. So ecological economists are advocating or have been advocating for the use of multiple criteria in making decisions, in kind of weighing different outcomes and the different aspects of these outcomes. This notion, actually, incommensurability and multiple criteria, goes back to Otto Neurath's and Otto Neurath's kind of contribution to the socialist calculation debate's first kind of iteration back in the day. And it has been operationalized by ecological economists in different ways, especially kind of as an alternative to cost-benefit analysis in using in making environmental decisions. So what that means is that planning should be taken into account as kind of as not as many, but adequately multiple criteria for while making decisions and while comparing different options and outcomes. So I'm gonna perhaps stop there. I don't want to kind of go through the all the models and what they do and what they do not. But maybe that I'm hoping that what I just kind of try to outline in 15 minutes might serve as kind of further discussion points, and I'm happy to maybe expand on them. And I think some of my colleagues and co-authors are here in the chat, so they might jump in too. So, and yeah, I can see in the chat that someone has brought John O'Neill, and John O'Neill is like one key person that has brought the question or the discussion of or the work of Neurath in kind of ecological economics. So I'll stop at that, and we can discuss more if you'd like to.